Sometimes love arrives when everything goes wrong. A blind date, a broken wheelchair, and a mechanic who changed everything. Like, share, and subscribe. And tell us where you're watching from. Now let's get started. Emma had been anticipating this blind date for weeks. Living in Chicago and juggling a demanding career as a graphic designer, she rarely had time for social life. Her friends insisted she try something different, and after much convincing, she agreed to meet someone new. The cafe she chose was cozy, tucked into a quiet street near Lake Michigan, with large windows that caught the morning sun. Emma arrived early, hoping to calm her nerves. She parked her wheelchair near the entrance, checking her reflection in the glass. Everything seemed fine until she tried to push through the narrow doorway. The front door was slightly tighter than she expected. As she pushed, her wheelchair stuck halfway, wedging against the frame. She panicked, trying to maneuver it backward, but it refused to budge. In her struggle, she accidentally knocked over a cup of coffee someone had placed on a nearby table. The dark liquid splashed onto the floor, creating an immediate mess. Emma's face burned with embarrassment as the cafe patrons turned to stare. A few whispers floated her way, adding to her mortification. She felt trapped, frustrated, and completely helpless. Then, out of nowhere, a man appeared. He was tall, with dark hair slightly tousled, wearing a mechanic's jacket that seemed a little out of place in the cafe. His expression was calm, but attentive as he assessed the situation. "Here, let me help you," he said. Without waiting for her response, he bent down and carefully adjusted the wheelchair, freeing it from the doorway. Emma felt a mix of relief and awe at how effortlessly he handled the situation. His hands were sure, gentle, and precise. She took a moment to collect herself, trying to appear less flustered than she felt. "Thank you," she murmured, still slightly embarrassed. The man smiled warmly. "No problem. Happens to the best of us," he replied. His voice was soothing, carrying an unexpected charm that made Emma's heart skip a beat. She realized she had been so caught up in her embarrassment that she hadn't noticed him before. "I'm Jake," he said, extending his hand. "Emma," she replied, shaking it, feeling an electric tingle at the contact. It was a strange start for a blind date, but somehow the awkwardness made it more memorable. They decided to sit together, trying to salvage the date despite the rocky beginning. Conversation flowed, albeit cautiously at first. Emma learned that Jake was a 30-year-old mechanic who loved tinkering with old cars and motorcycles, often restoring engines that others considered beyond repair. There was a quiet intensity in his eyes when he spoke about his work, a focus and dedication that was strangely captivating. Emma shared stories about her design projects, the challenges she faced in a competitive field, and the little joys of creating art that resonated with people. By the time their drinks arrived, they were laughing over minor mishaps and shared frustrations. The awkwardness from earlier gradually melted away. Emma noticed how attentive Jake was, constantly making sure she was comfortable in her wheelchair and adjusting his chair to match her level. It was small gestures like these that spoke volumes about his character. She found herself opening up in ways she rarely did on first dates. Topics shifted from work and hobbies to more personal anecdotes, childhood memories, favorite trips, and dreams for the future. Despite the initial disaster, there was a genuine connection forming. Emma was surprised at how effortless the conversation felt, as if they had known each other far longer than a few minutes. As the date progressed, the cafe filled with morning patrons. Jake's presence made the chaos around them fade into the background. Emma noticed that his laughter was contagious, and his gaze, while casual, carried a warmth that was rare to find. She felt a sense of ease she hadn't experienced in years. Even when she recalled the wheelchair incident, it no longer felt humiliating. Instead, it became the catalyst that had brought Jake into her life. The awkward moment had been transformed into a shared story, a funny anecdote that broke the ice in a way that nothing else could have. By mid-morning, they decided to leave the cafe and take a short stroll along the nearby lakefront. The crisp Chicago air was invigorating, and the view of sailboats gliding across the water provided a picturesque backdrop for their budding connection. Jake offered to help Emma navigate the uneven pavement, and she gratefully accepted. Each step was deliberate, but the tension had lifted. They spoke more freely now, teasing each other gently, exchanging smiles that lingered longer than necessary. The date had started in disaster, but it was transforming into something unexpected and beautiful. As they returned to the café to retrieve their coats, Emma reflected on the morning's events. She realized that life often presented challenges in strange ways, but sometimes those challenges led to moments of genuine human connection. Meeting Jake hadn't gone according to plan, but perhaps that was exactly the point. She found herself hoping that this was only the beginning of a longer story, one that had started with spilled coffee and a stuck wheelchair. What had begun as embarrassment now felt like the first chapter of something remarkable. Before parting ways, Jake asked if he could see her again. Emma smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't anticipated. "I'd like that," she said softly, her nervousness replaced with anticipation. They exchanged numbers, and as Jake wheeled her down the sidewalk, she felt a flutter of excitement mixed with curiosity. The blind date that had begun so awkwardly had unexpectedly opened a door to possibility. Sometimes, life's most chaotic moments led to the most memorable encounters. Emma watched Jake walk away, her mind replaying the morning in vivid detail. The coffee spill, the stuck wheelchair, and the quiet kindness of a stranger who became so much more. Each memory etched into her heart. She couldn't help but smile, knowing that sometimes, even in moments of embarrassment and disaster, life had a funny way of giving exactly what you needed. This blind date, gone so wrong at first, had just changed everything. A few days after their awkward but memorable café encounter, Emma faced a familiar problem. Her wheelchair, which had been acting up intermittently, began making a loud grinding noise every time she moved. Frustrated, she tried adjusting it herself, but the repairs were beyond her skill. The memory of Jake's calm and capable hands returned to her, and she found herself dialing his number without hesitation. When he picked up, his cheerful greeting made her feel at ease immediately. "Hey, Emma." "What's up?" Jake said. She explained the problem, hoping it wasn't too inconvenient. He insisted he could help and offered to come over the same afternoon. When Jake arrived at Emma's apartment, he carried his toolkit and wore a casual, confident smile. Emma noticed how methodical he was, even just unpacking his tools. "Don't worry, I've seen worse," he said, kneeling beside the wheelchair. His hands worked quickly, checking bolts, inspecting the wheels, and carefully testing the frame. Emma watched in fascination, noticing the way his brows furrowed slightly in concentration. There was a quiet focus in Jake's manner that made her heart race. She realized she felt a sense of security in his presence, a feeling that had nothing to do with her wheelchair. As he continued working, Jake explained each step in simple terms, showing Emma what had caused the issue. A misaligned axle and a worn-out wheel bearing were making her chair difficult to maneuver. "It's nothing major, but it needed fixing before it got worse," he said, smiling. Emma couldn't help but be impressed by his knowledge and attention to detail. She had met plenty of people, but rarely someone so patient and kind, willing to take time to teach while helping. Watching him work, she felt a strange mix of admiration and warmth growing inside her. Emma attempted to help, handing him screws and tools when asked. Each small interaction allowed them to talk more comfortably, bridging the gap from strangers to friends. She laughed at his dry humor and quirky observations about mechanics, while he listened intently to her stories about life in Chicago and her love for art. The conversation flowed effortlessly, the earlier awkwardness completely gone. By the time Jake finished the repair, her wheelchair moved smoothly, rolling effortlessly across the apartment floor. Emma felt relief and gratitude, but more importantly, she felt a budding connection that went far beyond the mechanics of her chair. Once the repair was complete, Jake tested the wheelchair thoroughly. He maneuvered it around the apartment, demonstrating its improved responsiveness. "Try it," he said. Emma pushed off gently, marveling at the difference. "Wow, it's perfect," she exclaimed, genuinely impressed. Jake smiled, brushing his hand across the wheel as if he were proud of his work. She realized the effort he put into something seemingly small had a much larger meaning. He cared, not just about fixing her chair, but about her comfort and independence. It was an intimacy she hadn't expected from a mechanic. Afterwards, they sat on Emma's couch, sipping water and catching their breath. A comfortable silence settled over them, punctuated by the occasional smile or glance. Emma realized that this moment, simple yet profound, was unlike any date she had ever experienced. There was no pressure, no pretense, just two people enjoying each other's company. She felt a sense of calm and trust she hadn't anticipated. The wheelchair repair had become a metaphor. What seemed broken or inconvenient could be fixed with care, attention, and patience. In that small apartment, a deeper bond was quietly forming. Jake asked about her plans for the weekend, casually suggesting they explore a nearby art exhibit together. Emma hesitated, unsure if she wanted to move too fast, but his easygoing nature made her comfortable. "I'd like that," she said, smiling. The idea of spending more time with him, outside the context of her wheelchair, excited her. They talked about their favorite artists, shared childhood memories, and even debated over their preferred styles of painting. Emma felt her heart open in a way it hadn't in years. The simple act of repairing her wheelchair had led to conversations that revealed their compatibility and mutual respect. As the sun began to dip outside her window, the warm afternoon light casting shadows across the room, Emma felt a mixture of anticipation and contentment. She realized how quickly life could change. A few days ago, she had been anxious, embarrassed, and uncertain about her date. Now, sitting beside Jake, she felt seen and appreciated for who she was, not just her situation. The awkward cafe encounter had been transformed into something meaningful. What began as a small act of kindness had blossomed into the first real step toward a connection neither of them had expected, yet both were eager to explore. When it was time for Jake to leave, he carefully packed up his tools, making sure everything was in order. He gave her a warm smile and said, "Call me if anything goes wrong again. Or even if it doesn't, I don't mind coming by." Emma laughed softly, feeling a surge of affection. "I'll definitely call," she replied. As he waved goodbye and stepped into the hallway, she realized she was already looking forward to their next meeting. The wheelchair repair had done more than restore mobility. It had restored hope, laughter, and a sense of excitement for the future. Emma watched Jake leave, feeling a quiet thrill in her chest. The situation that had begun as an ordinary inconvenience had grown into a meaningful connection. She rolled her wheelchair to the window, looking out at the Chicago skyline, bathed in warm evening light, reflecting on the day's events. The chair moved smoothly under her hands, a tangible symbol of the care and attention Jake had put into her life. She smiled, feeling grateful for the unexpected turn of events. Sometimes the smallest gestures could ignite the most extraordinary changes. For Emma, this was only the beginning of a story she hadn't imagined, yet couldn't wait to live. A week after the wheelchair repair, Emma received a text from Jake. "Want to go for a walk by the lake this evening?" Her heart raced as she typed back an enthusiastic yes. That afternoon, she prepared herself carefully, feeling both nervous and excited. She hadn't felt this anticipation in years, not since before her accident. When Jake arrived, he greeted her with a warm smile that immediately melted her anxiety. He helped her navigate the sidewalk carefully, offering a steady hand, and they began walking toward the nearby lakefront, the Chicago skyline glowing in the fading sunlight. The air was crisp and carried the faint scent of water and autumn leaves. Emma felt a sense of calm she hadn't expected. Jake and she moved side by side, talking freely about everything from favorite movies to childhood dreams. They shared stories of small victories and embarrassing moments, laughing together at experiences that once seemed trivial. Emma felt her trust in him grow with each passing minute. It wasn't just that he had fixed her wheelchair, it was the way he had listened, cared, and treated her with respect. This trust felt rare and precious. As they reached a quiet spot along the lake, Jake suggested they sit on a nearby bench. Emma wheeled herself closer, and they both admired the water stretching into the horizon. The sunset cast a golden glow across their faces, painting the moment in warmth and serenity. For a few minutes, neither spoke. They simply watched the sailboats drifting slowly and the reflection of the city lights shimmering on the lake. Emma felt a profound sense of peace. She realized that Jake's presence had transformed the anxiety she usually carried into calm anticipation, and she found herself smiling more freely than she had in a long time. After a while, Jake turned to her, his dark eyes reflecting the sunset. "I'm glad you let me help," he said softly. Emma's heart skipped a beat. "I'm glad you came into my life," she replied. The words felt natural, sincere, and somehow inevitable. It wasn't about the wheelchair anymore. It was about two people connecting in a way that felt effortless and genuine. She felt seen for the first time in years, not for her limitations, but for who she was. Jake's quiet confidence and kindness had changed everything, and Emma realized she wanted this connection to grow, to explore what life might bring together. They talked more deeply about their families and personal challenges. Emma shared how difficult life could be navigating the world with a wheelchair, and Jake listened without judgment, sharing stories of his own struggles and moments of self-doubt. The exchange built a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. There was laughter, but also a tenderness in the conversation that made Emma's chest swell. She felt a rare, exhilarating freedom in being able to express herself fully. For the first time, she realized that her wheelchair wasn't a barrier to love or connection. It was simply part of her story, and Jake had embraced it without hesitation. As twilight settled over the lakefront, they continued walking, pausing occasionally to admire the lights of Chicago reflecting off the water. Emma marveled at how natural it felt to be next to Jake, sharing both silence and conversation without awkwardness. He occasionally adjusted his pace to match hers, ensuring she felt comfortable and supported. She felt a rush of gratitude mixed with affection. Every small gesture, the way he listened, laughed, or gently guided her, added to the growing connection between them. The evening wasn't just a walk. It was a turning point, a confirmation that their bond was real and meaningful, transcending the circumstances that had brought them together. By the time they returned to her apartment building, the night sky glittered with stars. Jake helped her maneuver the wheelchair to the door, then paused. "I've had a great evening," he said. Emma smiled, feeling a warm flutter in her chest. "Me too," she replied softly. There was a moment of stillness, a quiet understanding hanging in the air. The awkwardness of the blind date, the spilled coffee, the wheelchair repair, all of it led to this instant. Both realized that what started as chance had blossomed into something intentional and powerful, something they both wanted to nurture. Before leaving, Jake gently touched her hand. Emma felt electricity surge through her, a connection deeper than she had anticipated. "Can I see you again soon?" he asked. She nodded eagerly, feeling a rush of joy. "Absolutely," she whispered. The sincerity in his eyes assured her that this was more than casual interest. It was the start of something significant. As he waved goodbye and walked down the hallway, Emma felt a mix of excitement and hope. The blind date that had started so awkwardly had transformed into the first chapter of a story neither of them expected, but both were ready to embrace. Alone in her apartment, Emma reflected on the week's events. The wheelchair repair, their walks, and the shared conversations had revealed a side of life she hadn't experienced in years. Connection without pretense, trust without hesitation, and companionship without judgment. The emotional journey had begun with a small act of kindness, and now it had grown into something profoundly meaningful. Emma smiled at the thought of the future with Jake, realizing that life's unpredictable twists often led to the most extraordinary moments. The blind date gone wrong had indeed changed everything, and she felt ready to embrace whatever came next with hope and excitement. The next morning, she rolled her wheelchair to the window, watching the city come alive below. The events of the past week replayed vividly in her mind, each moment highlighting the unexpected beauty in ordinary circumstances. She thought about Jake's patience, humor, and gentle care, understanding that their connection was built on more than chance. It was based on respect, empathy, and shared joy. As sunlight streamed into the apartment, she felt a sense of contentment and anticipation. Life, she realized, could surprise you in the most extraordinary ways. That blind date, once a source of anxiety, had led to a story she couldn't wait to continue.